Oh, hello, welcome back. Let's talk about mixing vocals. Now, I know that processing vocals, mixing vocals can be something that people really struggle with learning. Vocals are just like such a complicated thing to deal with because we've got frequency ranges that are constantly moving. Every singer's different, every microphone's different. And not only do you have to understand the technical side of things, you also want to have an artistic goal and vision for how your vocals sound in your mix. We're going to go through it each step of the way. You'll be able to follow along. I'm using all AutoTune plugins today, so if you have AutoTune Unlimited, you can use the same plugins and the same settings as me. All right, let's make some vocals. First things first, this song is called Get Like This. It's a dance song from my artist project, actually, called Webb, spelled VVEBB, just to make sure it's extra confusing. The vocalist on this track is Primo the Alien. We released it as a collab together a couple years ago. So let me just play you the track with the completely raw vocal in there. It's going to be hard to hear it sometimes because it's not compressed or anything. There's no processing on this except for some auto-tune.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Pillows they cover my head, sun won't spill into my head. Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else.
Fun fact about this was actually sent over to me as just the demo vocal. And then I was like, I'm just going to use this for the final version. This is an interesting vocal and one that really potentially is going to be tricky in a mix situation. Let me explain why. First, let me solo it out so you hear it.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Yesterday I was myself, but today don't want to deal with the bullshit.
One of the things that's going to make this tricky is this is a very dynamic vocal performance, both in the difference between, the softest and the loudest part of the performance, but also it's really dynamic in terms of the range. And we want to get all of that to sit evenly, to feel good, to cut through the track without being muddy, but we don't want to thin it out too much, or it's just going to be really piercing when we get to these higher soaring parts. So we've got our work cut out for us. Let's talk about what my goal is for these vocals. How do I want the lead vocal to sound? And I mean, one of the most common mistakes I see people make over and over again is they just start processing kind of without any sort of direction or artistic vision for what they want. So I always encourage people, just stop and think for a second, what are you going for? So what I'm going for with the lead vocal in this song is I want it to be compressed. I want it to be saturated. I want it to feel exciting and almost kind of like this compressed whispery sound. I want to bring that out of the vocal. I also know I want to have some cool effects treatment going on that just kind of makes it washy at times and, kind of immersive. So that's what I'm going to be trying to achieve with this processing. The first thing that I'm going to do with this raw vocal before I even put any other plugins on it is I'm just going to go clip out different sections here, and I'm going to automate the volume of those sections. I'm going to turn the clip gain up or down. That's happening before any of the other processing. The reason I want to do this is I want to give my compressor a more even signal to work with. I just went in and I just chopped these things out, and then I just clip gained them up or down. And they don't need to be perfect. You don't need to go too crazy with it. If you go too crazy with it, then you kind of take some of the nuance out of the performance. It doesn't need to be perfectly uniform, but if you narrow that dynamic range with some automation or with some clip gain automation, then your compressor is not going to be working super hard and not at all during some sections. It'll be working less hard and more hard. It'll be working less and it'll be working more. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put on the AutoTune vocal EQ. This is one of my favorite plugins right now, particularly for EQing vocals. Who would have thought? But there are some unique things about this EQ that just make it so useful. Let me just hit play and you can see the analyzer go real quick.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
First things first, we're just going to do a really fast high pass filter to get rid of this super low like sub boom from either, being too close to the mic or like hitting the mic while it's tracking, just plosives, things like that. So you can see it down here on the analyzer, and I'm not going to carve out any actual low end from the vocal performance, but I'm just going to get rid of that stuff that we don't need.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
Perfect. We are going to control the low end, but we're going to do it with pitch tracking, which is super cool. Once I started using this plugin and really figured out how it works and how I could use it on vocals and honestly on other instruments, it just opened up like a whole new world of possibilities with EQ. It replaced like some other things that I used to do a lot. And now this is just like one of my go-to ways to control exactly what I want to control without messing with anything else. First thing I'm going to do is just turn on this band in the low end. And normally when you turn on a band, you're just going to have this frequency knob over here, just like you would on, any other EQ. But I'm going to hit this track button. So if you look at the graphic real quick, watch this.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
So when I hit track, that means that this EQ band right here is now going to start following along with that fundamental note. So watch what happens.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
So now I have a band of EQ that in real time is tracking the fundamental of the vocal melody. This is so useful for vocals. Normally I would have to do something like set up, a multi-band compressor to try and just control the low end and just the low mids. But then sometimes, the frequency of the melody might go outside of how I have the multi-band set up for just a second. Or, maybe you use something like Soothe, which can be a cool tool, but like it's automatically generating bands. And sometimes I don't want a bunch of extra EQ bands generated into my sound that I don't have that much control over. This is a super cool solution for vocals because it's just going to follow the melody and duck or boost in that specific spot. One of the things I almost always have to do when I'm mixing vocals is I want to tame the low end. I want to control it because usually, you might have some buildup from somebody being really close to the mic, or it just might be notes in a super low register, and in the context of a track, it just gets too muddy. But I don't like, doing huge cuts in the low end because I don't want to lose all of the warmth in the vocal. So this is a great way to just control a little bit of that. So if you'll see, I've got my Q set to 1.7, so it's like not super wide, but also not super narrow. And then I'm just pulling that down by 2 dB. So let me play it without.
The wrong side of the bed. I tried to phone you.
On.
The wrong side of the bed. I tried to phone you.
Just a little bit of control. We're going to do one better by that because I know I'm going to compress this vocal a lot and I want to control the low end and low mids before I compress it. So I'm going to turn on this second band. I'm using pitch tracking again, but this time I'm going to the second harmonic of the note. So if I just keep moving this, watch what happens as I move the harmonic. It's going to move up in frequency. So look.
Pillows, they cover my head.
So at 1, it's doing, what the first one was doing. It was the lowest fundamental note. But as I move through the harmonics, watch what happens.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Pillows, they cover my head, son.
So this is like super useful for targeting certain frequency ranges based on the musical relationship to the fundamental note. I'm going to go back to tracking harmonic number 2.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
Which is just some of that low mid. Again, I don't want to get rid of all of it, but I do want to control it and get some consistency before I hit my compression. So I've got that on 2 bands now. The other thing that I really like about this EQ is it has a tilt function built into it, which does exactly what you think. You can tilt, less low end, more top end, or you can tilt more low end, less top end, and you can pick your crossover frequency for that. Super useful at just gently making your vocal a little bit more bright overall, a little bit darker overall. I'm using this to just slightly tilt towards the bright side of things. You can see, really gentle. This is what it sounds like off.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey.
That's what it sounds like on.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey.
Subtle. We don't need to do a ton. So this EQ also has a dynamic EQ built into it. And for that, on this band 5, I'm just slightly dynamically EQing this kind of frequency range right here.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey.
So it's not really going to react that much in those sections when it's down low in the melody. But let's go to the sections where things kind of start to get higher in pitch.
Yesterday I was myself, but today don't want to deal with the...
So we're just holding that like upper mid-range edge. We're controlling it just a little bit, just by 2 dB when it really starts to pick up. The last thing is we've got this air band on. So just boosting a little bit above 10K to kind of bring out some more of that life, some of that, exciting energy without boosting where there's going to be like a ton of sibilance. So let me turn it off.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey.
Just some of that nice top end. And this air band, I think, sounds just really musical and natural. I really like it a lot. So that's our EQ setup for our lead vocal. Let me turn it all off. This is what it sounds like completely bypassed.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey.
Back on.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Hey.
Not drastically different, but definitely more controlled. Okay, the next step in our chain, we're going to grab the vocal de-esser. This is one of my favorite de-essers. I think it sounds really natural. And then also, it's just really fast and easy to set up. So you just don't have to think about it that much. There's been times where I've just opened it up, left it on default, and that is how it came out in the final mix. If you do want to control it, it's got 2 of my favorite controls. Rather than just like a frequency that you select, it's broken that up for you into kind of the S type sounds, and then the like more consonant like t, ch, k, like that type of stuff. So it can control those separately. And then this sets the maximum amount of de-essing that you're going to allow it to do, which is like the most important control for me in de-essing is like, I don't want it to just be able to de-ess forever. I want it to have a maximum amount. The other thing I want to mention is like sometimes I will de-ess after compression. Sometimes I will de-ess before compression. And really the only way I make that decision is when I'm mixing, if I'm noticing some S's poke out or kind of hit me a little too harsh, before I've compressed anything. Like if I'm already noticing it, then I'll just go ahead and de-ess before I compress anything else. I'm just going to turn this on.
Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else. Yesterday I was myself, but...
I just think that sounds really smooth. It sounds nice. It sounds controlled, but not overly controlled. And it takes no time to set up. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull up the vocal compressor and we're going to start compressing and getting some more excitement out of this vocal. I really like the way this plugin is set up because you can have it just in single mode here where you have, one compressor, or you can just go ahead and have dual mode and it will run one compressor right into the second compressor. A lot of people like to stack compression on vocals. I tend to be one of those people. And we're going to set up just the first compressor here. Okay. I'm going to use modern mode for stage 1 here. You can also use FET mode, but I just thought modern mode sounded cool here. So I set it up with a 4:1 ratio. I always want my first compressor, when I'm stacking compressors, to have a pretty fast attack to control the bigger transients. So I sped up the attack. 10 milliseconds was the default. I just sped it up a little bit. And then I'm going to set my threshold to do around 5 dB of gain reduction on the loudest parts of the song. And my makeup gain is also going to be 5 dB. So everything that is not the loudest part of this song is just automatically going to get 5 dB louder. And everything that is the loudest part of this song is pretty much going to stay the same volume that it was. So all of our quiet stuff is getting louder by setting the compressor up this way. Or another way you can think about it that I heard from a mastering engineer, super helpful, is compression just means more loud more often. My peak level, like the maximum peak level, is going to be the same, but my overall loudness over the course of the vocal is going to go up. So here's what that sounds like, just this first one set up.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
So you can see we're doing just a little bit of compression in these quieter parts. Let's go to some of these louder moments.
Yesterday I was myself, but...
So you can see we're doing, 4 or 5 dB, something like that. Sounds really smooth, sounds nice. We're just grabbing those bigger peaks. The lower sections are coming up in volume. The higher, louder sections are getting controlled. That's a great stage 1 in our compressor. Okay, so for our second stage of vocal compression, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on now. I've got the Opto A set up, and I want to do more compression with this. I really want to squeeze it because I want to lock this vocal into a dense arrangement. And I also want kind of the energy of the compression. So I also clicked this warm button, which is going to turn on some tube saturation. I drove that up, and then I backed the overall output down so that it's a little bit closer at its loudest point to a similar peak level. It's going to be louder in the verses. You're going to be able to hear it a lot more clearly, and it's just going to be more locked into place. But let's hear what that sounds like.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else. Yesterday I was myself, but...
Okay, let's compare that real quick to the whole compressor bypassed and just listen to how much more consistent it is with the compression on.
Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else. Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else.
So I know somebody that hears that is going to comment on here, well, it just got way louder. And yes, it did get louder, but the perceived loudness went up by a lot, and the consistency of loudness went up, right? More loud, more often. The actual maximum peak level before and after this compressor is about the same. At the loudest point, the biggest plosives are hitting like -12, and on the compressed version, it's hitting -12, -11. Also, we're going to go back and we're going to set levels after we've gotten all our processing done. I just want to remind you that picking up consistency and volume, picking up perceived loudness while preserving headroom by controlling the peak level is a good thing in a lot of cases. It's what we want to happen with this vocal. We want to increase the density, the consistency, the excitement, the energy, without just making the peak level go crazy louder. We're going to start to get a little fancier with it, and we're going to keep pushing things in the artistic direction that we want to go. I set up some parallel channels, okay? I made 2 buses that I'm sending a copy of the lead vocal to right here. One of them is called parallel compression. One of them is called saturation. And then all 3 of these, both our regular lead vocal that we just worked on and the parallel compression and saturation, are going to a vocal bus. So I'm going to have all 3 of those things controlled by one fader, and I'll be able to process on that fader. So let's talk about the parallel compression first. I'm going to use the same plugin, vocal compressor, but this time I'm going to set it up in just single mode. And I'm going to use the FET compressor. And if you know anything about FET compressors, they are famously usually pretty aggressive and exciting. And what I want to do with this is smash the vocal, because we're going to blend this in with the less compressed vocal, and we're going to get some urgency, some saturation, and some excitement out of it. So I went for a super high ratio, a medium fast attack, a fast release, and then I've got the saturation on, and I am just slamming the input of this.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
That is a lot of compression. We're doing like 20 dB of compression on this, and that's great. We are just going to season that into the vocal. And it's cool that we have this on a separate fader, because now I can automate how much of this really intense compression is blended in from section to section. So if the vocal's like more exposed or the song dials back in arrangement, I can automate this aggressive compression down and the vocal will immediately sound more natural. But when things get really crazy, when everything in the song is going really hard, this is going to help that vocal stay locked in. It's going to help people still be able to hear it and understand what it's saying. The second thing I'm going to do on this parallel compression channel is I'm going to use another EQ instance. And this kind of looks a little bit crazy, but let me explain why I did this. I first off kept our tracking of the low end, but this time I made the Q wider, but we're pulling out 5 dB of this like low fundamental. I also used the tilt EQ to tilt a little bit brighter, and I'm pushing some mid-range up as well, around 2K by about 3 dB. I'm doing all of this because I want the mid-range and I want the top end to be super compressed in this particular bus, so that when I'm mixing it in with the regular vocal, I'm not mixing in a bunch of extra low mid information. I want to keep those frequencies under control like we have in the main vocal. Let me play you the parallel again with the vocal EQ off.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
Now I'm going to play the parallel with the vocal EQ on.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
And then we're just going to pull it down to 0. And in context with the song playing, we're going to start to blend that in.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Pillows, they cover my head. Sun won't spill into my eyelids.
We'll leave it there for now. How much or how little of that you use is going to be totally up to what you're going for. And I'm going to make that decision once I've got more stuff in context. But let's talk about this parallel saturation. This time I'm flipping the order. I'm doing kind of a similar EQ thing that I did before. I'm pulling out a lot of low mids and boosting some top end. And then I'm also using the dynamic mode on this EQ band to control the sibilance going into this distortion. Why am I doing this before instead of after? The simplest answer is because I wanted to. I tried it both ways off camera, and I thought it sounded better controlling the top end and the low mids going into this distortion than trying to like control it afterwards. So this is how I have the EQ set up on that send, and then it's going into the Avox Warm tube saturator. And this is set up on stun. 12 dB up, 12 dB input boost, Omnitube on, and then I've just got the gain back down a little bit. Remember, we're going to be blending this in, but this is what it sounds like. Solo it out.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
A little of this is going to go a long way, but again, it's just another color we can kind of paint with while we're working on this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to listen in context, and I'm going to play with the balance of this vocal that just has our EQ and compression on it, and then these parallels, and just kind of the overall volume of the vocal. So let me just kind of spend a second trying to find a volume level of this stuff that feels good for right now.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer. answer me. Pillows they cover my head. Sun won't spill into my eyelids. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Pillows they cover my head.
So like listen to this section here with no parallel in.
Pillows they cover my head. Sun won't spill into my eyelids. Yesterday I was myself.
Same thing.
Pillows they cover my head. Sun won't spill into my eyelids. Yesterday I was myself.
So we're getting a little bit of a level boost, but we're also getting way more controlled harmonic excitement in like the mids, the upper mids, and the top end. And that's really what I want. Now that I've got this all going to this bus and that we've kind of like really increased the amount of, excitement in the top end, now's a good time to maybe control that just a little bit and make sure that we're happy with like the overall amount of control. So I pulled up another instance of de-esser, but it's set up way more gentle than we had before. So let's listen to that.
Pillows they cover my head. Sun won't spill into my eyelids.
Perfect. We don't need to do a ton. We're not trying to, go too far with it or anything. But I do feel like having that extra little bit just catches a couple of sibilance areas that are kind of annoying. Then we've got one more little EQ part. With this EQ, I really wanted to do two things. One, I wanted to get just a little bit more of this like 1K, 1 to 2K area in the vocal to just like let it sit and just kind of like poke through the mids of the track. So let me play that first.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me.
The second thing I did was I actually did some automation, and I took this band right here in blue and I only turned it on when the vocal goes up in register. And then that band is dynamically EQing just this range in the like 2 to 3K area. I'm using the track functionality and I set it to a higher harmonic that lives right in this area. And all I wanted to do was just dial back a couple of points that I felt like it's just a little harsh. It was a little bit annoying in a few spots. So like you'll see it turn on when we transition out of the verse here.
Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else.
Perfect. Just tiny little moves like that can help it sit, even though the vocal is changing range, so often throughout the sections of the song. The dry vocal is really starting to fit, the vibe that I was going for and starting to fit into the track, but we want to give it some cool effects treatments now. So I went ahead and made some extra buses and I named them all. So the first thing I did was create this one called Widener. And I wanted to create kind of like something similar to like a chorus or like a doubler, just something to widen the vocal out. And I want to make it feel smooth because there are moments when this vocal is by itself and, I don't want it to feel like it's necessarily doubled, but I want it to take up a little extra space in the stereo field. And also like in electronic music, a little bit of like a chorus on a vocal can just sound really cool. So I'm sending the vocal to the choir plugin and I messed around with a few different voices, but I just thought it sounded really cool and smooth having all 32 voices on. Turned vibrato down, turned the pitch variation down, but I left the timing variation and that's going to kind of help you get that stereo feel. And this is what that sounds like.
The wrong side of the bed, I tried to phone you.
It's like a really cool, smooth chorus sound, but I'm just going to blend in a little bit of it. I kind of liked it mixed in about here with the vocal.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
It's pretty noticeable and solo, but let's kind of play with the level in context here.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me.
It's going to become less noticeable once we put the other effects in, so we'll come back to the level of it. Second thing I did was create this bus called Ambience, or Ambience if you fancy. For this reverb, I set it up, and I'm taking advantage of a lot of these extra features to make it sound just how I want. So first, we're doing no pre-delay, room reverb style, shortest decay possible, and then I've got the damping turned up all the way, diffusion at 50%. And then all of this stuff is where the magic is going to happen on this. So I've got tube on all the way up for some tube saturation on the reverb. I've got smooth all the way up, which is going to control like the top end going into the reverb. It's like extra sibilance control just in the reverb tail. Then I've got this tone shaper on. I'm filtering out some top and bottom end, and I'm tilting up the mids a little bit. I've got the reverb compressed at 100%, and I've got this auto EQ on, which is super cool. It's using the same pitch tracking from the EQ plugin to duck out certain frequencies of the reverb so your vocal and your reverb sit better together. It's super cool. This is what the reverb sounds like.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey.
In context, with it mixed in,
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me.
this is super cool. It's really subtle, but this is a great way to add some depth to your vocal, especially if you want the vocal to maybe still feel kind of dry in a section. You can put something like this on your vocal and give it some space around it without it really getting in the way of the dry signal. The next one is very fun, very dramatic, very appropriately named. It's called Swirly. I even saved this as a preset because I liked it so much. I was like, I'm going to be using this again. I've got delay on before the reverb. And then I've got ping pong on to get some like stereo movement. Quarter note on the delay, 75% mix. We want a lot of it going into the reverb. Feedback is pretty high, not low passing it at all. Then I've got it set up on a hall. Pretty high decay, damping and diffusion are up. I've got the lows filtered out again because I really don't want it to get muddy. I've got smoothing on again so the sibilance doesn't get out of control. Doing a little bit less compression this time, but I have that auto EQ on 100% again. And basically what I wanted to create was this like crazy atmospheric swirly soup. But I don't want it to get in the way of the vocal. I want it to trail behind the vocal, and I want the vocal to kind of push it out of the way. So it just kind of creates this really cool cloud. Let me show you what it's like when it's turned up way too much.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me.
Super cool. We don't need a ton of that though. So again, I would start with it, turned down probably to some degree. And then I would just go in here and listen in context, and I would just turn it up.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, hey. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me.
And this is something that I can automate, to swell in and out louder at certain points. It can become this really dynamic vocal effect, but I just love how like lush and atmospheric it makes the vocal without getting in the way. For the last vocal effect we're going to do, I'm just calling this bounce. It's just a faster delay with some chorus on it. So for this, I used EFX Plus. I turned the retune speed as slow as it will go, turned off these modules over here because I just want this echo. Got it set up to 8th note with 55% feedback, and then it's running into a chorus to just get like a little bit more stereo feel to it. And this is what that sounds like. It's going to add some cool like motion and momentum to the vocal.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
Super nice. Creates this cool rhythm within the track, and we're just going to blend that in like we've blended all the other effects in.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Pillows they cover my head, sun won't spare.
This is the kind of blend that you can get creative with and have a lot of fun adding, dynamics to the effects happening from section to section. So what I would probably do is go in and automate each one of these things. So let's go back real quick and listen to just the raw, unprocessed vocal in context with the track, and then listen to what we did with our vocal chain.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me.
A lot of inconsistencies there. I'm like trying to turn it up so you can just even hear it in the context of the track. This is where we landed.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Tried to phone you, but you didn't answer me. Pillows they cover my head, sun won't spill into my eyelids. Yesterday I was myself, but today I'm someone else. Yesterday I was myself, but today I don't wanna deal with the bullshit.
Woo! I think that sounds great. I love how that sounds. It's really taken on, the vibe that I was hoping for with the song. And from here, it's just a matter of taste and kind of finessing in the levels and the blends. And now that I've got all these buses set up, I can really make it move with the song, and kind of the vocal can grow and get more saturated or more compressed at moments. It can get more natural sounding at moments. It can get more verbed out. It can get drier. And so I would just go in and really create contrast. But I'm super happy with how this vocal chain sounds. Honestly, I think that the vocal sounds better to me right now than the vocal does in the released version of the song. So, take that for what you will. Speaking of which, you can listen to the released version of this song if you just type in Get Like This on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. And don't forget, my artist name is spelled with 2 V's because I'm a crazy person. Or you can search for Primo the Alien, Get Like This. It will also come up. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please take the time to give it a like, give me a subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know if you have any questions about mixing vocals down in the comments. I'll be down there. I'll be answering questions. I'm always happy to help. If you want to try any of the techniques that I use with the same plugins I just used, they're all available in AutoTune Unlimited, so you can go grab them at autotune.com and give it a try. Okay, we'll see you next time. Don't forget to have fun out there.